Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be taking a deep dive into all of the defenders in FPL this season, breaking them down and categorizing them by price point and figuring out which ones are most suitable for our FPL teams. This is the final one in a series of deep dives, so if you haven't seen the midfielders or the forwards, go check them out. And of course, if you could leave a like, hit subscribe, and hit that notification bell, that would be massively appreciated. And of course, you won't miss out on any future content. Okay then, so starting off with the highest priced defenders, all 6 million in this category. And I'm a little bit surprised that none came in at 6.5, but I think there are plenty of very good options, and it gives managers a decision to make based on their attitude to the way points are scored this season. So you've got Gabriel and Saliba first up with 6 million price tags, centre-backs nailed in for Arsenal. Gabriel has obviously had the injury, so just monitor that. Just make sure that he is fit for the start of the season if you're going to go there. Those first two fixtures are not bad for clean sheet odds either. Man United and Leeds, not bad at all. They then go into a little patch of poor fixtures with Liverpool, Nottingham Forest. I think Man City and Newcastle are in there afterwards as well. But if you're free hitting in maybe game week 3 or game weeks 5 or 6, if they go up against Man City or Newcastle, I think they become slightly better defenders to own from the get-go, and their defensive data is the best in the league as well. So despite the fixtures, I still think there's a very strong argument to include one of them from the off and just lock in those clean sheet points when they come for Arsenal. I think they'll be well owned, as you can see here, in combination 40% ownership across the two. So there's still gains to be made, but I think the fixtures are putting off some people. I don't think the fixtures are that bad. I think in 3 of the first 4, there's a decent chance of a clean sheet. And then if you can free hit in one of those poorer fixtures, then they might be a good hold all the way through to around game week 12, because the fixtures turn pretty good very soon after game week 6. I think it is game week 7 that the fixtures turn very nice. Moving down, you've got Cucurella at 6 million. I think that's, again, a pretty fair price. Got 5 goals, 2 assists last season. Did overperform on the underlying attacking data. But I do expect Chelsea to be another solid defence this season. They looked very solid in the Club World Cup. Cucurella is still getting forward a lot. Bit of a box crasher, 20% ownership. I think he is a good pick. But I think when you're looking at the actual points he would have scored with defensive contributions added in, because he doesn't get many of those, 139 points across the season might not be quite as strong as some of the centre-backs we've talked about. So Gabriel, Saliba, both would have beaten him. Gabriel, if he would have played the minutes, obviously. And then you've got Van Dijk we'll talk about, Gvardiol we'll talk about. Both would have beaten him significantly because of the defensive contribution points. So a good option, especially when the fixtures are good, and they've got a decent run to begin with at the start of the season. So will be a factor, not in my current game week 1 draft, for the reason that I just want that nice drip feed of defensive contribution points with the clean sheet odds as well. Now, the 3 Liverpool options here that I'm talking about are Frimpong, Kerkez, Van Dijk. I'm not talking about Robertson because I just don't think he'll get the minutes with Kerkez coming in. But with that noted, Frimpong and Kerkez, I would be a little bit cautious to begin with, because although I don't think Robertson is any longer a starter for Liverpool, consistently anyway, he'll still get minutes. So Kerkez, for me, isn't a nailed 90-minute man, will get brought off early, might get the odd time where he doesn't start a match. And the same might go for Frimpong on the right-hand side, where Bradley is still a factor. And in pre-season so far, Frimpong has actually been playing on the right wing at times with Bradley at right back. So I think Slot still considers Bradley an option, and Frimpong might not be as nailed as we'd like him to be at the beginning of the season, although the underlying attacking data is ridiculously good. So if he is nailed, he becomes a very good option. Even without defensive contribution points, he is going to get a lot of points this season if he can nail down that starting spot at right back and get 90 minutes a match. I think he will nail down that starting spot. But if he gets brought off early, or maybe even gets the odd rotation, that could dent him as an appealing FPL option. The reason I say both of those things is because I prefer Van Dijk. The reason I do is because he's going to start 37, 38 games a season. He's not awful on the attacking returns. He'll get 2 or 3 goals a season. And You've also got the defensive contribution points as well. Now, all of that considered, last season, he would have hit over 160 points with the defensive contributions added in. That is a ridiculously good pick for the value for money. So 6 million. If you like the upside of attacking returns, I understand going for a Frimpong or a Kirkez, probably a Frimpong because he's got more goal threat. But I think Van Dijk across the season will just serve you very well. He'll get you the clean sheets, even when you least expect them. You can start him in every single game because he's likely to get the defensive contributions across the difficult fixtures just as likely as he is the easy fixtures, and he'll just drip feed you those 4-pointers even when he's not keeping clean sheets. Then you might spike the odd goal, you might spike the odd clean sheet as well. Obviously he keeps a fair few of those, and I expect Liverpool to keep around 14, 15, maybe even up to 18, 19 clean sheets yet again. I think at 6 million, he's great value for money. Even with the opening set of fixtures, including Newcastle and Arsenal, I still think he's going to make my game week 1 draft at time of recording. I still think he'll drip feed very nicely with those defensive contribution points, and he'll be great value for money. Now, the same conversation probably is applicable to the Man City defenders here. Gvardiol and Ait-Nouri both come in at 6 million. One is going to be much better on the defensive contributions and just that nailedness. That would be Gvardiol. And Ait-Nouri could be a ridiculously good attacking option. Got 11 attacking returns in the league last season. Great underlying data. And obviously has come in to be the left back for Man City. But would I be surprised if every now and then he got brought off early or might not start a game? No, I wouldn't. Not at all, because Pep does do those sort of things, and Gvardiol has proven he can play left back at times. So Ait-Nouri, I think, will be a very good option, but I just want to see him nail down that starting spot from the off. And honestly, I don't think I'm losing out by that much by having Gvardiol instead, if I was to pick a Man City option, of course, because he still ticks along nicely with attacking returns. Even if he's not playing left back, he'll go up for corners. He's got great aerial threat, so he'll get the odd goal. And if he's at centre back, he's likely to get a few more defensive contribution points as well. I think with Gvardiol, it's just that reliability of having 90 minutes week in, week out. With Ait-Nouri, you've got the upside. You'll spike some big hauls, but you might just be a little bit worried that every now and then you'll look at the team sheet and just not see him starting. And I think he'll start 30 plus games this season. I'm not saying he's going to be a B team option and he's not going to start the majority. But even if he misses out 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 games, that can be a little bit frustrating at this price point. And I think Gvardiol probably beats him over the stretch if he just reliably ticks along with a few defensive contribution points and, more importantly, getting those 90 minutes where he can bag the clean sheets, he can bag the attacking returns every now and then as well. So I think I'm a quite conservative manager, especially considering those defensive contribution points, but I'd more favour of the 6 million defenders, those centre-backs that I know are going to start, I know are going to get 90 minutes, at least to begin with. After a few game weeks, we can reassess and we can say, okay, Frimpong, Ait-Nouri, Kirkez, they are nailed, they are getting 90 minutes and they're getting a load of attacking returns, and then I can pivot to them from these price points really easily. So now looking at the 5.5 million defenders, a lot of good options here as well, way too many to fit on the spreadsheet once again. So at the start, I've got Lewis Skelly just as that Arsenal example. I personally wouldn't be going for a 5.5 million Arsenal option because 1, Gabriel and Saliba are the most nailed at just 0.5 more, and 2, if you look at all of the fullbacks at Arsenal, I don't think you can reliably predict which ones are going to start and get 90 minutes week in, week out. If any one of them completely nails down a starting spot and looks like a 90-minute man, they become much more interesting. Lewis Skelly, obviously, towards the end of last season, did look very interesting, but you've got Ben White, you've got Calafiori, you've got Timber as well. You've got a number of options on both sides that can play, and I think that just ruins them a little bit as FPL options. I haven't included Man City options at 5.5 here either. I think that's because 1, Gvardiol and Ait-Nouri at 6 million are more interesting and probably more locked in, especially with Gvardiol. You've got Ruben Diaz, you've got Ake, you've got Akanji, you've got Kusanov as well. You've got so many City options. I just couldn't reliably tell you, and Stones as well. I couldn't reliably tell you week in, week out which ones are reliably going to start. Diaz is probably the most nailed of them, but even he every now and then gets brought out of the side, and at 5.5 million you just don't want to deal with that. So moving down the table, you've got Reece James. If only he could stay fit, he probably becomes a slightly better option. He's playing a more withdrawn role now after all of those injuries, so he probably will stay fit, but equally that means that the underlying attacking data isn't what it used to be. So again, at 5.5 million, I would probably if I was looking at a Chelsea defender, I'd probably just spend that extra money on Cucurella, who is far more advanced and far more likely moving forwards to get attacking returns. Munoz for me is one of the best options on this spreadsheet. At 5.5 million, he got 10 attacking returns at 0.24 XGI per 90, which is phenomenal, the best out of all of the 5.5 defenders. The start of the season isn't great, but at times this season, in fact, even arguably at the start, despite those fixtures, I think he is going to be one of the best players to own at this price point. For a player that is a wing back and effectively a right winger at times, I was surprised to find that he also does very well for a fullback on the defensive contributions, and it would have bumped him up to over 150 points last season. So a very good option at 5.5 million. I'm a little bit surprised they didn't put him in at 6 million. It might be because he plays for Palace. Tarkowski and Branthwaite, I'll talk about Tarkowski here, but you could equally look at Branthwaite, not quite as good on the DEFCONs, but Tarkowski is in pre-season training. I think he's likely to start in game week 1, but keep an eye out for that because he's been out for a while with a pretty significant injury. One of the best defenders in the game for DEFCONs. I think he would have gotten a bump of 42 extra points if he had those DEFCONs added in and a good opening fixture. I think the price tag is putting people off, but don't sleep on him. At 5% ownership, he could be a really good option at times this season. Arguably even from the start, if you believe that Everton are going to continue to be a solid defence from the get-go. Those first 3 fixtures, Leeds, Brighton, Wolves, I wouldn't be massively surprised if I saw a couple of clean sheets in there. Moving down, you've got Konate. Would be really tempting to save the 0.5 if you knew that he wasn't off in the summer, or obviously he's got interest from Real Madrid at the moment. If he is that starting centre-back, it might be a nice way of saving 0.5 on a Liverpool player. I think I'd personally still go for Van Dijk. Honestly, I think the DEFCONs plus the nailedness plus the 90 minutes for Van Dijk, I think it all adds together to be worth that extra 0.5. The 2 Newcastle assets at 5.5, Hall and Shah, not bad options whatsoever. Hall won't get many DEFCON points, but is pretty good on the underlying attacking data. And Shah, annoyingly, doesn't actually get as many DEFCON points as I thought he might. I thought he'd be a bit of a cheat code. It doesn't actually turn out that way, but has good goal threat. And as you can see here, although his attacking underlying data, the XGI per 90, is a bit lower than Lewis Hall's, he's got far better goal threat. So if you want to spike a big haul out of one of these two, Fabian Schär might be the way to go. On to the 2 Nottingham Forest centre-backs. You've got Milenkovic and Murillo, both at 5.5. I think that is absolutely fair, considering the numbers that they put up last season. Around about 1.3 XGC per 90, a slight difference there because there was an injury or a minute's difference in one of the two. But Milenkovic has the higher goal threat from the set pieces, and Murillo has the much better defensive contributions per 90. So I think it's more of an attitude thing. As you can see, they came out with almost identical points last season when accounting for both of those things. Murillo will tick over nicely with a more consistent flow of points, but Milenkovic might get you the odd spike here or there from the attacking return from a set piece. So, like I said, I think it depends on your attitude to FPL and your attitude to those spikes. If you're happy to ride out the 2s to the 7s to the 11 pointers with Milenkovic, that's absolutely fine. Murillo will be that more consistent drip feed of points, obviously still getting the clean sheets, still getting the odd goal here or there, but a lot rarer than Milenkovic. But the floor is a little bit higher for Murillo on a consistent basis. So I like both of them. It's purely down to an attitude thing. I'm tempted to say Milenkovic just because it is quite fun to get the odd goal out of a defender, and that can make a game week and create a pretty good memory as well, which, let's face it, we're playing FPL for fun, so the goal threat is nice to have. Porro, finally, don't sleep on Porro. I might not include him from the start because of that price. If he came in at 5 million, I'd be very tempted. A great game week 1 fixture against Burnley and very good underlying attacking data. He got 6 assists last season in a very poor season for Spurs and 8 attacking returns overall. So I think he's a player that might be going under the radar a little bit at the start of the season and will become a very good option when we see that defensive data improve under Thomas Frank. But I understand at 5.5 million that he might not be a player to go with from the off, unless you're bench boosting, of course. With Burnley at home, it's a good starting fixture. But after that, it's Man City, then Bournemouth, West Ham, arguably okay. But I still think there are enough question marks with Spurs for me to just leave it to one side for now and come back to him at a later point, because I do expect him to be a good option. I just want to see a little bit more from the off to begin with. So moving on to the 5 million defenders, a number of good options at this price point, too many to talk about in this video. And I've selected my favorites from a lot of the teams. So for example, Collins I've picked instead of Lewis Potter, but Lewis Potter could be a good option. You've got Lacroix instead of Mitchell. Mitchell could be a decent option. I prefer Lacroix. I'll talk about why in a moment. You've also got O'Brien instead of Mikolenko. You've got Byrne or Botman instead of Livramento potentially as well. So lots of good options, but I've hand selected a few of my favorites and especially picked out specific assets from each individual to side where possible. So Collins was absolutely incredible last season in terms of the attacking returns, the CBIT points. That obviously won't go away, but the defensive numbers weren't great. And when you add in the fact that he massively overperformed on the XGI per 90, for me, he's probably an option I will look past because I don't expect him to repeat this sort of season again, especially at 5 million. I think there are 4.5 options that I would back to keep more clean sheets this season and also arguably are better on the attacking data as well. So Collins, I don't hate him as a pick, but I think the overperformance last season might be convincing a few managers to go there. Although, to be fair, he's 1.5% owned, so not too many. Moving down to the two Chelsea options, you've got Colwill and Gusto. Gusto, I'm less convinced on because I don't think you can guarantee the minutes, although he has looked good, especially in the Club World Cup at times, so might be an interesting option with good underlying attacking data there. Colwill got a lot of minutes for Chelsea last season, not great on the defensive contribution points, but if Chelsea are a good defence again this season, at 5 million, he's a pretty nice way into that defence rather than spending 6 million on a Cucurella, for instance, or if you're not convinced on Sanchez in goal at 5 million, he might be a pretty good safety net. They are still buying players. I know that they've got their eyes on a couple of centre-backs, so look out for that. But I think Colwill is likely to still be fairly nailed. Moving down, you have got Lacroix, really good on the defensive contributions. In fact, one of the best in the entire league. And he would have hit 148 points last season if those points were added in. Not terrible on the attacking output either. 0.13 XGI per 90. Got 3 attacking returns. So actually, I think he's going a bit under the radar at under 1% owned. The fixtures aren't great though, so it might be one that you come to after a few game weeks. But I do like him in a potential rotation, or again, if you don't have that extra 0.5 spare to go for a Munoz, Lacroix's defensive contributions balance him out just a little bit, and he's not that far off of Munoz when you look at the actual output, the actual points from last season. Mikolenko, Everton's defensive numbers are great, so I think he is going to be an interesting option. I know they've signed another fullback, but I don't expect that fullback to be starting to begin with. Mikolenko has done enough to deserve a starting spot for a fair while yet. The fixtures at the beginning of the season are okay. So again, if you want Everton coverage, you could look at a Mikolenko or an O'Brien. 4 attacking returns is actually quite high for Mikolenko. He doesn't usually get any. So I wouldn't expect him to repeat that necessarily this season with that kind of underlying data. But 135 points last season with defensive contributions included. It's not a bad pick whatsoever. And it is an easy or cheaper route into the Everton defence, where a lot of the other options are 5.5 million. You're looking at Pickford, Tarkowski, Branthwaite, all at that price. So a little bit of a cut price, not a bad option. You've got Robinson, who last season got the most assists of all defenders in the league last year. 10 assists, very, very good. Did overperform on the numbers, but again, you'd expect him to be fairly decent value for money at 5 million. And for a fullback, actually pretty good on the defensive contributions as well. So there are very few fullbacks that are good, but he is a definite one of them that can get you that little bump from defensive contributions every now and then. And considering his attacking data is not bad, I think that's pretty nice in a combination. And when the fixtures are good, Robinson will be a pretty decent pick once again. The same can be said for the Nottingham Forest fullbacks, especially Williams. I prefer him over Ait-Nouri. The reason is better underlying attacking data and better on the defensive contribution points per 90. In fact, Williams is, I think, one of, if not the best fullback in the game for defensive contribution points, and isn't that far off of the likes of a Murillo or a Milenkovic when it comes to that output as well. So if you want to save a little bit of money, that 0.5 might go to better use elsewhere and move down from a Murillo or a Milenkovic, you're getting good underlying attacking data and decent defensive contribution points out of Williams. So he's an option that I'm very interested in. And I can't believe he's only 2% owned, especially when you look at Ait-Nouri, who's 18% owned with worse attacking numbers and worse on the defensive contributions as well. I think that might be down to the fact that he got off to a hot start last season and he's pretty good on the bonus. Also, he got more points than Williams did last season, but that's mainly due to the rotation and injuries towards the start of the season. Williams nailed down a spot, and I think he is just as locked into that lineup as Ait-Nouri is at the beginning of the season. So I would probably go to Williams. Finally, you've got Romero. I think, unfortunately, he's not an option for me at 5 million, considering you've got Porro at 5.5, who's got much better underlying attacking data. And we'll talk about Van de Ven and Udogie at 4.5 for a bit cheaper, who are just as good when it comes to the defensive contributions and arguably just as nailed in as well. So on to the 4.5 million defenders. And honestly, there are just a ridiculous amount of 4.5s I could have talked about. I'll highlight a few here. I've picked out, is it 12 or 13 that I think are my favorites, but they're by no means the only options. There are loads of other options that we could go through here. So for example, you've got Dunk at Brighton. I could easily be talking about Van Heck in a very similar way. You've also got Gahey, who is a very good option at 4.5 million if he stays at Crystal Palace. But if he were to move on, then Richards at 4.5 could be the option to go for at Palace instead. So Gahey, let's talk about first up, got, I think, the most attacking, well, certainly the most goals out of all of these defenders, not quite the most attacking returns. Not bad underlying attacking data for a 4.5 million centre-back either. Okay on the XGC per 90, and importantly, got a fair few defensive contribution points, bumping him up to 130 overall. So again, at 4.5, you're looking for a bargain that could provide a little bit more upside from those defensive contributions. 130 is not bad, and in a rotation pairing, might be a player that you're potentially interested in. I think Crystal Palace rotate with a fair few clubs, but the first 3 fixtures are probably not ideal in the sense that you want to be playing them every single week. So a good 4th defender maybe as a bench option. The same goes for Wan-Bissaka, who also would have hit 130 points last season with those defensive contribution points added. The defensive data is far poorer than a lot of the other sides here. In fact, I think it's the worst out of all of them, but he does make up for that with the attacking returns, and the XGI per 90, that attacking threat, is not too bad. He got 6 assists last season, did get forward a fair bit, and towards the back end of last season looked like a pretty good option. That Sunderland fixture in game week 1 is doing a lot of heavy lifting because it is a good fixture. And that's, I think, the reason why he's owned by almost a third of the FPL player base. That is a large amount considering that sort of defensive data. He was in my game week 1 draft to begin with in a rotation pairing with Konza, which I don't mind considering I think between them they play 6 promoted teams across the first 12 game weeks, which isn't bad whatsoever. But you'd have to be hoping that West Ham tighten up at the back, and meanwhile Konza doesn't get too many defensive contribution points himself, so you're just hoping for clean sheets from him and maybe a few defensive contribution points and the odd attacking return from Wan-Bissaka. I don't mind it as a pairing though, and at 9 million as a combination, that could work out pretty well. De Kuyper is a player I want to talk about briefly as well. Great underlying data at his previous club, Club Bruges, I think it was. 0.46 XGI per 90. That proves he does get forward. He's a very advanced fullback. And with Estupiñán gone, he might be in line to be that starting fullback for Brighton. So a lot of hype, rightfully so. I think the Barco situation from last season is putting off a few people, but I understand why people would go there from game week 1 and take that gamble. There are potential other options that could play left back, but they've signed him with the intention of being the left back, I think. So I think he's a good option. I don't love the opening stretch of fixtures, but to be fair, Fulham, Everton and Bournemouth, you wouldn't be surprised, or too surprised anyway, at clean sheets in a few of those. So not a bad option. 10% ownership. He's not quite differential anymore, but you still get a very good gain from him if he were to bag you any points. We don't know what the defensive contribution points would be like just yet, but I think we can assume as an attacking fullback, they're not going to be that great. Looking elsewhere, a couple of other picks I do want to spotlight. Anderson at Fulham, great on the DEFCON points. He didn't get that many minutes last season because of an injury, so maybe a little bit overlooked, but the opening stretch of fixtures, it's not box office, but it's not terrible. You can play him in a certain rotation pairing. I don't mind him. Leeds in game week 4 in particular is probably a standout there. But importantly, he's one of the best 4.5 million defenders when it comes to that upgrade when you take into account the CBIT, those defensive contribution points. Senesi is fairly similar as well. Very low owned, very differential. And with all of the Bournemouth sales in defence, a lot of fans are suggesting he is going to start a lot more games this season. I think he's a wait and see for me considering those opening few fixtures, but eventually he could be a pretty good option. And another player that does really well on the baseline for his defensive contributions per 90. So keep an eye out for him. You've got the Tottenham assets towards the bottom there, Van der Ven and Udogie. Neither of them got many points last season. One, because the defensive data was terrible, and two, injuries. If they can stay fit at 4.5, they could be really decent options, but don't expect many defensive contribution points from them. Burnley game week 1 is a great fixture, so on a bench boost, I understand entirely why people would be picking them from the off, and that's probably why their ownership is just a smidge above 10% at the moment. So finishing off with the 4 million defenders, and honestly, there's not a lot to love about the 4 million price point this season. Most of the defenders that are on the menu at this price are from the promoted sides, and the ones that aren't are just not guaranteed to start. So Heaven is the only one I think here that I'm recommending as a 4 million option if you're looking for a team that hasn't been promoted this season. Man United. Heaven might get minutes at some point, but I think realistically, that's a wait and see. I don't think you're expecting him to start the season just yet. So I'd probably put him to one side, even though the CBIT per start or per 90 is actually looking pretty good. So if he does nail down a starting spot, then he could be an option. Looking at the promoted clubs, though, the one that appeals to me the most is Burnley's Esteve. Now, the reason I like him is not just because Burnley kept a lot of clean sheets last season and the defensive data was good. It's also that defensive contributions per 90, up at 8.37 in a championship season, which they not dominated, but did very well in. You wouldn't expect them to be defending quite so much with their backs against the wall. In the Premier League, I reckon that number rises quite dramatically. That's a healthy number anyway. If it rises even a little bit, he could be a bit of a DEFCON machine. Now, obviously, we're not expecting loads of clean sheets. We're not expecting too many attacking returns with that sort of data either. But if he's your 5th defender and you want someone who starts every single week, they rate him really highly. I think they've put a 50 million price tag on him. So he's going to start every single week. With that in mind, if he can be last on your bench and come in at a time of crisis, in past seasons, a 4 million defender might have only gotten you 1 or 2 points, depending how many goals they conceded, of course. But even if Burnley concede a couple of goals or maybe even 4 goals, the defensive contributions might balance that out just a little bit and save you from needing to take a hit if you needed to rely on him in any given game week. He's not going to get you loads of points, but if he can get you 3 or 4 in a match, or even 2 sometimes, that's better than taking a hit in quite a lot of scenarios. So I like Esteve for that reason, but not a player I'd be ever intentionally starting. You've got the 3 Leeds United options all at 4 million. Rodon got a lot of minutes last season. Bijol and Goodmanson could be good options, but I think especially for Bijol, it's a wait and see because he's suspended in game week 1. Goodmanson can come straight in. I think they're expecting him to be the starting fullback for Leeds, or one of the starting fullbacks. Had a little bit of goal threat, but again, it's nothing to shout home about, and the CBIT isn't great either, which is why I prefer Esteve. The other thing to note with Leeds is actually, despite keeping less clean sheets last season, and what I've done here is the clean sheets from the teams in the Championship clubs, so Burnley 30, Leeds 25, Sunderland at the bottom there 17. Leeds actually had a better XGC per 90 than Burnley did last season at 0.67. So despite less clean sheets, they actually have better defensive data. So one to look out for there if you were trying to find some clean sheets at the very lowest ranks of the defenders. I still prefer Esteve personally, but the Leeds options, especially with that good game week 1 fixture, if you're looking at a bench boost, Goodmanson might be an option. Rodon might be an option. Not Bijol though, because he's suspended. Reinaldo, I think that's how you pronounce it. Not completely sure on that. So Sunderland fans, let me know. Comes in to Sunderland, fairly highly rated, not much goal threat. The defensive data for Sunderland wasn't as good as the other Championship clubs last season. Only 17 clean sheets for Sunderland in the Championship. I would probably avoid, but he is relatively well owned at 8.9%. I think that's partly because he comes from Atletico Madrid, so he's got a little bit of a name, obviously comes from a big club. But other than the fact he plays West Ham in game week 1, I don't find that option all that appealing. I would still prefer Esteve unless you're bench boosting in game week 1, in which case a Leeds option, maybe Ronaldo, but I still think Esteve is probably the player to go for out of the bunch if you're not considering bench boost. Now, as we reach the end of today's video, I'm sure there are loads of defenders I haven't had time to talk about today, so drop a comment below if you'd like me to discuss them. And of course, if you did enjoy the video, leave a like, hit subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell as well. You won't miss out on any future content as we start looking in our drafts ahead of game week 1.